Discovering Alabama is a production of the Alabama Museum of Natural History.
Life is precious, delicate, fleeting. Life is towering, powerful. Life sings, soars. It can be picture postcard perfect. It can be curious. It can be fascinating. Life is full of challenges. Life is full of surprises. Hi, I'm Doug Phillips, and this is The Good Life. Alabama. No matter where you are in our state, you're never far from the good life. We have more than 24 state parks. We can enjoy many beautiful wild areas that are part of Alabama's Forever Wild program. Across Alabama are numerous state forests, recreation areas, and scenic attractions of every sort. Many thousands of acres are protected as special wetland reserves in Alabama's coastal area. There are 10 national wildlife refuges, about 14,000 acres in the Little River Canyon National Preserve, and there are the National Forest, over 660,000 acres of woods, water, and wildlife. Back in 1985, Discovering Alabama featured a couple of national forest areas among our very first shows. Over the years, from time to time, we visited others. In this program, we're going to visit all of them. Join me for a whirlwind tour of the 6 districts of national forest in Alabama. Come along as we capture a literal overview of our national forests and at the same time consider their history and celebrate how these wooded wonderlands contribute to the good life here in Alabama. This program is about a land unknown to many people, a land that in many ways has maintained its native natural wonders, a place of bountiful backcountry, forests, streams, and wildlife more diverse than can be found in much of the inhabited world. Come along with me as we explore the wild wonders of this land. Come along as we discover Alabama. Welcome to Discovering Alabama, and welcome to the Talladega National Forest. I've often stood at this place and imagined that this must have been very much like the scene witnessed by the first settlers coming over the Appalachians into Alabama. And what a view it is! This wild country seems to stretch on forever, as if boundless and timeless. Yet it's the nature of time that things change. And this forest has changed markedly over the centuries. As recently as the early 20th century, this forest was, to say the least, quite different from what we see today. This magnificent point is up in the mountains of the Talladega National Forest. The Talladega is the largest of the national forests in Alabama. So big, in fact, that it's represented by 3 ranger districts. The Shoal Creek Ranger District in the high country of northeast Alabama, the Talladega Ranger District in the heart of Alabama's Appalachians, and the Oakmulgee stretching across the fall line hills. Up in northwestern Alabama is the Bankhead National Forest, among the steep ridges that separate the Tennessee Valley from the Mobile River Basin. Just below the fall line between Auburn and Montgomery lies the Tuskegee. And down on the Alabama-Florida line in the sandy earth of the coastal plain is the Conecuh. North, south, east, and west, the National Forests of Alabama offer up the gift of variety.
The original intent and purpose of the National Forest was to provide water as well as a continuous flow of timber products for a growing nation. Certainly we've evolved from that now. What we're about now is really managing for ecosystems and healthy forest, recreation experiences that we have, wildlife habitat, wildlife and fisheries habitat, as well as forage production. So while timber is a piece of that, we're much into multiple use management, which encompasses the demands that the public has today, which a lot of that is recreational use. And we meet the recreation use through a lot of different means, from hiking, hunting, fishing, to OHV trails, to horseback trails, and so on. So our mission has really grown over time, and the demands on the land has certainly grown over time as well.
Many tangible values can be enumerated when we talk about our national forest. Today, though, we also want to consider those values that may elude such easy description, values that are on a deeper, more personal level. There are values of the forest that create memories.
I remember coming down as a teenager. I remember coming down fishing with my dad, and I've even brought my children down here.
I remember coming down here when the CCC camp was working down here.
That's right.
There are values of the forest that create bonds. There are values that create lasting impressions. The forests of Alabama contribute to the quality of our lives in ways that are very real, yet difficult to quantify. How, for example, could we possibly put a price on a view like this? And what dollar amount could ever compensate Mother Nature for this exquisite waterfall? To the contrary, in an earlier period of history, human exploitation had robbed these forest lands of many of nature's gifts.
Most of the national forests that were acquired in the South were acquired under the Weeks Act of 1911. As opposed to the Western national forests, they were all public domain lands. The national forests in the East and the South were acquired national forests. And this purchasing started after 1911 and primarily during the 1920s and the 1930s. And these were lands that nobody wanted. These were lands that were cut over, that people left during the Depression. They were on farmland that was eroded, that was burnt over, that had been worn out. And much of our mission during the first part of the acquisition phase was that we used the Civilian Conservation Corps to reforest these acres, to do watershed protection work, and they've evolved to what they are today, and we consider them as crown jewels for the state of Alabama. But we owe a great tribute to the folks that we're following, not only the Civilian Conservation Corps, but our first employees that came to work with us in the 30s and the 40s, and those that came to work after the Second World War.
Embraced by the wooded wonderlands that dress Alabama's national forest today, it's hard to believe that these were once the lands nobody wanted. But consider this. This is the Conecuh National Forest in the 1930s. This is the Conecuh National Forest today. Not all of the national forests were as bad off as the Conecuh. Some were in worse shape. The erosion in what would become the Tuskegee National Forest was so bad that a whole community had to be relocated. Most of the lands that would become national forest in Alabama were victims of earlier periods of exploitation. Often only the more rugged areas escaped, as did portions of the Bankhead, still in pretty good shape around 1930. Aldo Leopold, one of America's early champions of conservation, said that land should be loved and respected as an extension of ethics. I like to think that the work done to nurture the National Forest of Alabama is an example of how ethical we can be. And it also shows that if we choose to do so, we can make a commitment to conservation for the long term. In many areas, the work done in the early 20th century is just now beginning to pay off, and not a moment too soon, because today, in the 21st century, our forests can fulfill a need that would not have been imagined back in the 1920s.
We all know, in this state particularly, we have one of the highest rates of obesity, one of the highest rates of diabetes, and that's both in adults and kids, and it's killing us. What's the remedy? Well, we know what the remedy is. It has a lot to do with diet and exercise. But what's happening is the outdoors are becoming less and less and less a part of our daily lives. And so exercise and diet and those kinds of things are seen now as something we have to do. It's not a part of our natural environment. The thing that's so wonderful about the outdoors is not only are you doing something for your physical health, but your overall quality of life is going to be improved because you're simultaneously hitting your emotional health and you're hitting your spiritual health.
Of course, we all know the benefits to the body from outdoor exercise. And now science is confirming what those of us who spend a lifetime in the outdoors have known all along. A walk in the woods is just as good for the mind and the soul.
Well, a lot of times we talk about quality of life and health-related quality of life. And there's debate about what makes that up, but there's a pretty good consensus that when you think about quality of life, you've got the physical component, you've got the sort of psychological, emotional component, you have the social component, your relationships, and for many people, there's the spiritual component. And to the extent that that spiritual component, this idea that there is something beyond me, is not fulfilled, then your overall quality of life is diminished. Regardless, I think, of your religious preferences and your beliefs, stepping outside into a forest, you are very acutely aware that there are wonders that don't exist in the office place. To the extent that that connects you in with a feeling of spirituality, Again, it goes back to that it reduces stress, it gives you mental clarity, it reduces heart rate and blood pressure, it makes you a more higher functioning person.
Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote, "In the woods we return to reason and faith." A biologist might construe this to mean that nature works in an orderly manner, perpetuating life in balance with its natural surroundings. A theologian might conclude that nature meets a spiritual need we have to be in touch with our Creator through His creation. Here in Alabama, our woodlands contribute to the quality of life in many ways. Indeed, more than the quality of our lives, our forests help define the character of life in our state. Camaraderie, friendship, and fellowship all are cultivated by a shared bonding among our wooded wonderlands. The lasting impressions our forests make on our body, mind, and spirit are far more than recreational. They are therapeutic. The forest provides a sense that we are part of the profound miracle of life. And in Alabama, our abundant forest is part of our sense of place. Our closeness to the forest is part of who we are.
Discovering Alabama is a production of the Alabama Museum of Natural History, the University of Alabama. This program is supported by grants from the Solon and Martha Dixon Foundation, the Alabama Wildlife Federation, working for wildlife since 1935, the Alabama Department of Conservation and Natural Resources, State Lands Division,